Say nine to gas-guzzling three-row SUVs.
I was gonna do this, but your thing's the keeper. I guess they're both the keeper.
There you go.
So we are with the first ever on all new 2026 IONIQ 9, and it's been a surprising drive with it. Right? It's challenging to get something so big to drive so well, but here we are.
There's your spoiler alert.
Where do you want to start?
I would love to start with one of the burning questions with this thing is, why did it take them so long? Because this is very closely related to the Kia EV9, which has been out for a year and a half. So it hotly anticipated for that entire time, people going, what is taking them so long? It turns out the answer to that is there's an extended wheelbase on this versus the EV9, and it has a larger battery, 110.3 kilowatt hours.
That's right.
But the end result is the longer wheelbase. Interestingly, when you look at the specs side to side with the EV9, almost all of the additional space has gone here to the second row and the cargo. The third row is roughly the same, and the front row is pretty well identical. So, but that additional space and the interior and that additional capacity for the battery were the reasons that Hyundai held on for just a little bit longer to make sure that they got this vehicle right where they wanted it to be, because this is the de facto flagship now for the brand.
So let's jump into the number side of things, because that's what people care about with your EVs. So there are 3 trims. First up is the rear-wheel drive, which is the essential. 215 horsepower, 258 pound-feet of torque, 539 kilometers of range, rear-wheel drive. Next up is the preferred trim, and that comes with all-wheel drive, 303 horsepower, 446 pound-feet of torque, up to 515 kilometers of range, so a smidge less. And towing with all-wheel drive configurations are up to 5,000 pounds. And finally, at the very top, the all-wheel drive plus, that gets you 422 horsepower, 516 pound-feet of torque, and up to 500 kilometers of range. So the big thing that they were pushing is that every single iteration of this gets at least 500 kilometers.
Right, of range. And all of the package walk that we went through there is Canadian packaging.
Right.
But there's only one battery size globally, and those 3 powertrains are available, we believe, in most markets. So again, this is the all-wheel drive plus, the higher powered version of the powertrain here. Absolutely no complaints whatsoever about the amount of power here. Without having tested the rear-wheel drive version, I do wonder, with the weight of this thing, how powerful that's going to feel.
I'm sure the rear-wheel drive has a market, but I think for most daily functions, never mind your road tripping or towing or whatever, go for something in the all-wheel drive configurator.
What really stands out to me with this is how incredibly smooth it is. Now, before we get into the slight criticisms, we'll start with just the good stuff. As we've said many times with EVs, the low set battery gives it a low center of gravity. That all rhymes. A bit of a tongue twister there. But the end result here is they've managed to balance a really nicely relaxed suspension feel that rolls over a lot of the imperfections in the road reasonably well. Not perfectly, but I mean, we're also in Tofino and Ucluelet in BC right now, and there are sections of the Pacific Rim Highway that have been flooded out and patched over the years, and those ones were where we sort of noticed some little bit more bounce, and every vehicle's going to bounce over those, right?
Yeah.
So, but generally speaking, on the average road, the suspension's really beautiful, but it manages to do it without adding any rebound or really significant body roll or pitch or anything like that. It's really, really stable, really smooth, and just, it drives like a flagship SUV should. The steering is nice and stiff. The one thing that I'll confess, I didn't think of this first. It was a colleague who brought it up, and it got me to thinking. The point that there's no air suspension available. And to be fair, in luxury vehicles, by the time you're spending what you're spending on one of these, and we're going to get to pricing in a minute, you often, maybe not in vehicles this big at the same price, but you do very often in vehicles this price have access to an air suspension. So that, but I don't find it needs it as much as, say, the Volkswagen ID Buzz, which also doesn't come with an air suspension, is a lot more crashy than this. So I think that the balance here is much, much easier to live with.
I wonder if they thought about it and realized, well, if we put an air suspension in, that's a bunch of extra weight.
All right, let's run through a few of the outstanding features. I mean, I don't think we need to talk a lot about twin 12.5-inch screens and that sort of thing in vehicles these days. That's all pretty normal stuff. So here's a few things that stand out in the IONIQ 9. One is what they call up in these upper trims, their relaxation seats. So you can actually fully recline, and there are footrests as well. And it's not only for the front row, it's for the second row as well. So, but not that part's cool. What I really appreciate about it is that because of the way that the seats are set up to recline, the seat cushion doesn't pivot from the back as it does in most vehicles. It pivots from the center. So I just find there's a lot more flexibility in being able to find a really ideal seating position.
In the top trim Ultimate Calligraphy, I also get a footrest, leg rest. I find the seat bottoms, for me, a little short, but that footrest kind of makes up for it. Speaking of the seats, we're kind of in luxury territory here.
They're very, very comfortable. Also, there is an exceptional amount of storage up front. Big pockets in the center at the front beneath the center stack here, and there are two 100-watt USB-C ports for super fast phone charging, plus a data port, although you don't necessarily need it because Hyundai has finally managed to get wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto into their 12.3-inch infotainment system, so kudos for that.
And you get two more USB ports on the backs of our seats for the rear passengers. And there is
a pair for the third row.
So you get 7 in total. And higher trims get wireless charging. So you can really charge up to 8 devices. There's
a shelf underneath the dashboard, and I'm not usually a fan of these. I find they can look visually cluttered very easily. But this one's really deeply recessed underneath the top panel here, and I find it's actually very tastefully done. I wouldn't mind storing things there.
You have this floating center console. It's manual, but I like that because less moving parts that are motorized, less things to repair, and it goes forwards and backwards quite a bit.
It's all very well thought out. The massive panoramic sunroof is really nice. It goes very far back into the cabin as well. And it's been interesting to watch the evolution of ambient lighting over the years. I think that Hyundai has really nailed it in this and in the Palisade, which was set up very similarly, the new one, where there's just a little color strip under the dashboard here and in the sides of the doors, which is quite a long strip because of the way that the door handle is set up. But it looks really sharp.
So for someone who is quite a supporter and enthusiastic about car camping.
Yes. So if you follow me and my stuff at roadtripper.ca, you may know that I am a huge fan of car camping. And I'm not talking about the kind of car camping where you throw a tent into the trunk. I'm talking about, no, I mean, it has its place too, but I'm talking about you drop all the rear seats, throw a mattress in the back and sleep right there in the car. Because to me, that's way more comfortable than a tent. I'm getting too old for that tent nonsense. The most important one is a complete climate control set for the rear cabin, which you can reach from the second row. So when you've got all of your seats set flat, you can actually control the temperature. Because this is an EV, if you're at an electrical campsite, just plug the car in. You're not going to lose charge overnight. And then you can just run the HVAC from back there and adjust the temperature and be comfortable all night. It sounds pretty freaking great.
And it's one of those things that I'm surprised no one else has thought of it.
Yeah.
Now, one quick thing to touch on that I forgot to mention, out of the 5 trims, only the top trim Calligraphy comes with a 2+2+2 configuration.
Right.
Everybody else gets a bench seat in the middle.
Right. The other thing about the Ultimate Calligraphy that's important is this is the only trim that comes with an interior V2L plug, so a household plug that you can use for things like plugging in small appliances or charging computers or that sort of thing. But if you want that camping setup and you want to use it here, that's actually a really cool feature, because you can just plug something in, you can charge a tablet off it, whatever, and watch movies and stuff while you're camping. And as long as you're somewhere where you've got access to data, you can watch and do whatever you want back there with anything that needs a plug.
And what's the most impressive thing to me, but not so much to you, but still cool overall?
Yes, that would be the button that gives you the tailgate access from inside the vehicle. I'm a little less sold on that one, because to me, I've always just kept the key fob nearby and closed the tailgate with the key fob from inside the car. Never had an issue with it, but you have to think ahead for that, and maybe not everybody does that. This is handy because when you're already in the back, you can just sort of reach forward and hit the button, and then you can open and close the tailgate to hop in and out of the car really easily. But altogether, a really thoughtful set of features that give IONIQ 9 owners access to some pretty cool outdoorsy stuff.
There are no visible antennas.
Right.
No shark fin, no big stick. Hyundai has put them in very clever places, and again, all in the name of maximizing range and the aerodynamic side of things. And
not so on board necessarily with the exterior styling myself.
Really?
That's very, very much a matter of personal taste, though. Styling always is, but there's a lot of function to it in this case. The coefficient of drag on this thing is ridiculously low. I can't remember the number off the top of my head. 256 or something like that?
Yeah, it's sports car low.
Yeah, the only car in Hyundai's lineup that has a lower coefficient of drag is the IONIQ 6, which we all know how slippery that thing looks. And it's especially impressive that they've done it with a beast this big, right?
Yeah.
It's really fascinating, some of the airflow drawings that we were shown in the product presentation. Really, they demonstrated how the air flows over these dents in the hood to go over the wheels and down the side, and then they're calling it the boat rear,
which I think is a terrible word to use.
It might give the wrong connotations, but it's just. It's as much function as fashion, especially with that sloping rear roofline, just to really make this thing slide through the air. And that, of course, as we know with EVs, goes a long way toward extending range.
Last couple of things on the design side. Up front, you have retractable flaps, which help air keep flowing. Which
look very expensive. Make sure that you're not going to nick your garage or anything like that with those.
Yeah, or a curb or a bollard or anything. But it looks cool.
Yeah.
I'll give it that. There are a lot of lights here, and I love it. I think it's a great way to add a bunch of flair without putting folds and dents and curves into the sheet metal to make it stand out. Full set of day runners and high beams and low beams, and the turret signals are all so creatively done. And same thing around the rear. You have that nice arc of lights, and I think it's one of the more unique vehicles as far as light design on the exterior goes on the modern market.
We haven't had an opportunity to test charging here because the cars were fully charged and we haven't driven more than 500 kilometers today. But what we know about this vehicle is it comes with standard NACS port, so you have access to any Tesla charger that allows outside OEMs to use it. So, and that's what comes standard, but then you also receive standard CCS adapter, so you have access to the existing CCS charging network as well. 800 volt architecture and up to 350 kilowatt charging speed. Whether you'll actually see that very often is hard to say, but that's the numbers we've been given. From the testing we've done, the car seems to do a very good job of hanging on to range. Preliminarily, what I'm looking at is that it's well outdoing its estimated range. But in the ideal sunny 15 degrees Celsius conditions that we're in today. So, of course, it changes based on the weather and that sort of thing, but the early signs are that this is going to do very well with that. Hyundai also has its 5-stage regenerative braking system here, which you can adjust with the paddles on the steering wheel. They say that they've adjusted the iPedal, the one-pedal driving function to be smoother. I don't know if I'm feeling a difference because they told me to. If they did, it's pretty subtle if that's the case. Jay is quite sensitive to the
I'm not sensitive.
Yes, to the eye pedal, and I think you said you didn't notice much of a difference, right?
I didn't, and that I think is the case for any one pedal driving. It's just because I'm not driving, I don't have that ability to prep my body for it. From the driver's seat, fine, but it's just still a very abrupt and forward lurching thing for me.
In most of the driving we've been doing today, we've been in level 0, full-on cruise and just gliding up and down the hills. It's been great, and that's when you're driving rurally, that's what you'll do most of the time. The one pedal's really for highway driving where you're in stop-and-go traffic and you want to make the most of regenerative braking, recovering range as much as you can. So here's a pleasant surprise. Normally when we do these first tries, we can't tell you anything about pricing, but we have Canadian pricing for the IONIQ 9 today.
We do.
So we'll put the total numbers on a graphic here on screen. The important parts are these. So for the base rear-wheel drive, you're looking at about 60,000, and that's intentional because not that there are a lot of rebate programs left in Canada anymore, but of the ones that remain in Canada, the base trim lets the IONIQ 9 qualify for those. So that's really important to make sure that the pricing stays affordable. And that actually connects to my next point, which is that the top trim, the Ultimate Calligraphy that we're driving here, is priced just a little over 80,000. And then that's less if you happen to live somewhere where the rebates still exist. But that sounds really expensive, and it is really expensive. Cars are getting expensive, but that lines up almost perfectly with, again, here it is again, the Volkswagen ID Buzz, which...
Yeah.
Now, you can get an EV9 for a little less, especially in the top trim off the top of my head. I think that this is worth the extra cost. I love this car.
Agreed.
Absolutely
agreed.
Yeah. Not the EV9 is a great car too, but I would choose this over the EV9. Would I choose it over an ID Buzz?
I think they're two different.
They are. They're completely different things for different audiences, and it really comes down to your personal taste.
I think it's going to eat into a chunk of EV9 sales.
Yeah.
And we were talking with our Hyundai rep yesterday, and one of my constant questions is, what's going to be your volume seller? And I was told the two top trims will be what moves the most.
That's unusual.
Yeah, like I think the base rear-wheel drive is there just to meet that rebate point. I think maybe 10% of buyers will opt for that, but the rest of the all-wheel drive trim across those 4 models are really, really well done.
Yeah. Thanks so much for watching, and if you haven't already, please hit that button down there that lets you subscribe so you don't miss any more videos, because we want you to see them and watch them and let us know what you think. And you can also find us on all the major social media platforms, so please reach out, and thanks for watching.
Hold on, we got to get out of the shadows. Okay.
Thanks for watching.